Raymond. There's a lot of exciting news around biotechnology with issues of genetically modified organisms, pharmaceuticals, space exploration, ecological engineering, which inherently gives rise to controversies that are often misunderstood or convoluted. And artists, too, employ tools used in biology to make art for an array of purposes that helps communicate science to the public. It may start a public dialogue, it may be for educational purposes, aesthetic or material purposes, or artist exploration, or no purpose whatsoever. So what is bioart? It's also called biotech art, transgenic art, life art, and it's distinguished by its medium. So the medium actually is the living matter in the form of genes and tissues and bacteria or entire living organisms and their ecosystem. Different processes that can be used include tissue culture, genetic engineering, cloning, plant breeding, gardening. But what's important is to distinguish between artists who use actual life as the material and not the concepts of life, like someone painting a painting of DNA or fungus is not a bioartist. You're actually using the fungus and the DNA to create the work. Medium mimetic biology is a word that's been passed around. That's living matter that imitates the media forms we've known to love over the last century. For example, bacteria in these petri dishes act as slow exposure film and are light sensitive. This is a portrait of Gregor Mendel made from biopointillism, which is a technique used with genetically modified yeast. Tactile media is also a word that gets thrown around. It's more situational, ephemeral, self-terminating. The Critical Art Ensemble is a group of artists, activists, and scientists who go out to the public and engage with them on an artistic level. And for example, this piece that you're seeing this clip from, they were talking about GMOs and discussing that with the public. Adam Zaretsky, crazy guy, another tactile media artist. He does all kinds of interesting things with exciting technologies like CRISPR and other technologies from genetic engineering. And he aims to provoke a rethinking of fixed moral positions about biotech research and catalyze open-ended discussions. Really interesting artist there. Bioart is nothing new. It's been around since the 1990s. Marta Jimenez was looking to explore the biological constraints of the butterfly system. And what she did is genetically engineer one wing to her design and left the other wing of the butterfly in its natural state. And so she wanted to see the differences between the natural and the novel natural. This is one of probably the most quintessential bioart pieces you've probably ever heard about. Eduardo Katz is a very famous artist in Chicago. And he took this verse from the Bible, "Let man have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the fowl of the air and over every living thing that moves upon the earth." And he took that verse and translated it into Morse code and then into DNA nucleotide bases and grew a bacteria from that verse. And then as the viewer walked into the gallery, the viewer was able to, through a computer, shine a UV light onto the bacteria, and they had the choice to genetically manipulate this other organism and have this human dominion over this organism. So then he took it back into nucleotide bases, back into Morse code, back into English, and you can see there that the English is all messed up and mutated. So bioart, like many topics in biotech, give rise to a lot of controversies that can be very convoluted. Sometimes it helps the progress of science, sometimes it does not. Like, in my opinion, the photograph on the left, I would say, does not help advance science. And the materials and tools and technologies of the life sciences are rife with a lot of political, cultural, ethical assumptions and implications. So artists have to have this ethical reflection on the boundaries of art and science and other issues of like life and death. But Bioart also gives rise to new milestones in art. For example, practices and concepts. Biotechnology is a new medium. We had painting, photography, and different styles of art over the years, and biotechnology is a new medium in art. And what's great about Bioart is it establishes all of these multidisciplinary collaborations. So we don't have the anguished, introverted painter in his studio anymore. Artists are working with scientists, anthropologists, sociologists. Collaborations are happening all across the board. And also public interventions are happening. Artists are going out in the public and making art accessible, making science accessible to people of all classes. Bioart leads to new inventions. Raymond already mentioned this piece by Joe Davis, where he genetically engineered bacteria into parts necessary for an AM radio antenna and actually made an AM radio. This is a plant theremin, a piece that I made. I wanted, as I told you, I teach plant physiology, and I wanted the students to finally think that plant physiology was cool. And so I made an instrument based from the plant theremin so people could actually play the plant. The chroma cord produces music from plant proteins. This is a piece that was done years ago by the Tissue Culture and Art Project, Ian Zur and Oren Katz from Symbiotica. And they do a lot of work on tissue culture in Western Australia. And they made frog steaks and staged this whole performance and ate dinner eating frog steaks. And that was the first dialogue that started synthetic meat, or discussing synthetic meat. Art can lead to new materials. This is me in my studio. I used to work a lot with fungus, and I was creating, my mother's a quilter, and so I decided to make a quilt out of fungus that was grown on potato dextrose agar as a matrix. And I held a quilting bee and a little stitch and bitch, and we got to talk about GMOs and science, and it was great. And this was the finished piece. That was alive at one point, and then it's dead now. These are paintings that I did with the fungus, and what I appreciate about these is you can't quite tell the microcosm from the macrocosm here, or even what it is. Some people come into my studio and they think I'm just working with beef jerky or weird skin or something. This is a piece called Victimless Leather. It was done in 2004 by Oren Katz and Ian Zur again. And this is a very famous piece. This is an installation in which a small leather jacket is grown, supported by this biodegradable matrix in vitro. And all the lab equipment, of course, carries the aesthetic of the piece. But what's interesting here is they're making a leather jacket from tissue culture. So they call it victimless leather. And that piece actually was at the MoMA and kind of grew out of control. And so they had to cut it off, but it was a great piece. One thing that I thought would be interesting for this crowd is to talk about art to product development. Phil Ross, who's a local San Franciscan, he makes these beautiful sculptures made out of fungus, just gorgeous pieces. And then he started working with furniture and making these. You can, when you're done with your chair, which is completely usable, you can throw it in your compost pile and it degrades with all natural materials. And now he started a company called Myco Works, which they're making leather-like products out of mycelium, out of fungus. But of course, Bioart is nothing new. Alexander Fleming, you may have heard of penicillin, you may have used it. He's famous for inventing it in 1933. What is less known is he was also an artist, and he was part of the Chelsea Arts Club, and he would make these beautiful, intricate, technically difficult to make paintings out of fungus and bacteria. And all those colors are different kinds of species that he used. And what's interesting is that fateful morning, so the story goes, when he discovered penicillin, is he was looking at his starry night sky and looking at the sky and looking at the planets and the stars, but noticed this fungus in the corner, and it was all black around there. None of his stars were growing, and that's how he invented the penicillin fungus, is because he had this eye of an artist. And no doubt other scientists had already seen, this fungus, but no one had actually really recognized it. Edward Steichen, very famous for his photography, but he's also a delphinium breeder, and so that was the first person who was hybridizing plants for the sake of art, and he did an installation at the MoMA, the first and only flower installation exhibition in 1936, which was really ahead of his time. You've all probably heard of Salvador Dali. He did Rainy Taxi. It was exhibited at the International Surrealist Exposition in Paris in 1938, where he incorporated snails and ferns and other living materials in his artwork. And after the World War, in 1974, Joseph Beuys, people started using a lot of animals in their work. Joseph Beuys sat in a gallery, very famous work, where he sat with a wild coyote in a gallery for a week as a performance art piece. And so since then, people have been incorporating animals in their work. In 2000, this is maybe a Bioart piece you've heard of. It caused a big controversy. This is a piece by Eduardo Katz, grandfather or father of Bioart. He took GFP, the green fluorescent protein, and inserted it into a bunny rabbit and made the bunny rabbit glow. And because it was a transgenic material, to no harm of the bunny rabbit, but it just glowed when you put a black light over it. But he couldn't move the transgenic bunny from Europe back to the United States, and it caused all this controversy, bring Alba home, and all this public dialogue was generated by this green fluorescent bunny, like, is that okay to make it glow? That's messed up. Can you bring it back, transgenic material? Can you move it back and forth from country to country? And this is in the year of 2000, so it really hit the newspapers hard. And the public dialogue generated by the piece is the art, not the rabbit itself. Stellark is a great example of someone who uses his body in his artwork. He considers how technology extends the capacities of the human body and how at the same time our bodies are becoming increasingly obsolete. And he claims that we're transforming ourselves into cyborgs and zombies by all of this technology. And so he uses a lot of machines and robots in his performance works. Joe Davis, the guy that invented the bacteria-run AM radio, he's created a microscope. He's at MIT, created a microscope that translates light information into sound, allowing you to hear what you're looking at. He's put a map of the Milky Way into a transgenic mouse's ear. And he's taken an apple variety very close to biblical times, as close as he could find, and he's encoding the entire English Wikipedia into the apple tree genome to make a literal tree of life. So artists have been using scientific technology for ages. Think about the camera, the computer, but Bioart, using life itself, one could argue that this has made a more revolutionary breakthrough in art history. But on the other hand, it causes criticisms. Is it going to grow out of control? Who's allowed to use these tools? Is it just scientists, or can artists use the tools as well? Can it be dangerous? Do the artists and the gallery spectators, you as a person who goes to look at the art, bear some sort of responsibility? And if so, what's your responsibility? And how do we classify these semi-living organisms? I mean, we can't use the classic Linnaeus taxonomic system created in the 1700s for some of these new organisms that are kind of living. And so these are all questions that Bioart brings to the public dialogue. And finally, I just want to say a few words about art and sustainability and how important it is for artists to be working in this arena. My work has gone from Bioart into more, I make a lot of work about climate change. So I think that what's more important than figuring out how to extend our body or to become better connected or to explore new man-made hybrid species is actually preserving and respecting the nature that we already have. And so we really need to focus on that, I think, as artists. So I backpack and travel a lot to be able to make my work. I often end up in very desolate, cold places. This is a piece that I did, a video still that was shown in Singapore about sea levels rising and due to man-caused heating of our Earth and melting of ice. And this is a video projection of an Alaskan ice field through melting ice. And of course, it broke and it didn't last forever. This is a sculpture that I made of oil and ice, and it changed. It was very beautiful as it melted the water and the oil together. And I just recently returned from a residency program with 24 other artists and scientists and writers and poets, and we were all on that sailboat there, a barkentine tall ship. And we were all doing our own work. The scientists were doing the science, and the poets were doing their thing, and writers were writing. And, but we were all really astonished by a couple things that we saw up there. So we went from Svalbard, which is about 79 degrees latitude north of Norway, to the North Pole, to the pack ice of the North Pole on the ship. And here we can talk about climate change. You see it on social media. You see graphs and things like that, or trash in the woods when you take a walk. But at the North Pole, the climate change is so in your face. For example, the declining number of polar bears that are so thin there because of the lack of sea ice. They fish standing on the ice, and they don't know how to hunt on land. That was a polar bear that I saw there. And also the beaches at the North Pole are covered in plastic because there's no one there to clean the plastic up. The only beaches you see that are clean, the only reason why they're clean is because someone's paid to clean them up for you. There's no one to clean them up, so it's covered in plastic. And this is plastic just for a year. And so we cleaned it up, but you can't get these tiny little specks of microplastics that are all over. And the wildlife they're eating the microplastics, but they're not getting any nutritional value, but getting full and dying because of all these plastics. So in conclusion, artists and creativity are vital for the exploration of ideas and processes, materials, inventions, protests, sustainability, and multidisciplinary collaboration is paramount for making this planet a better place. And I feel like the well-being of the planet, no matter what your objective is in life, needs to be on everybody's mind. So thank you very much for your time.